long enough. Just hang on to your seats because I'm gonna do my very best to not butcher this. But no, the combination of those two is obviously epic, and that's basically what this book was. Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Mabel Journals, where we talk about books and we talk about journals. If this is your first time here, hello and welcome. And if you're coming back, I want to apologize because I know it's been a few... You know what? No. I want to thank you for your patience. I'm trying to stop myself from apologizing because I feel like I do that a lot. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for waiting. I know it says new videos weekly and I haven't posted a video in about 4 weeks. But here we are and we're going strong. I have a whole plan for my filming and editing schedule, so these should be a lot more frequent than they have been in the past few weeks. So for this video, we are going to go over all of the books I read in April, and I am aware that we are halfway through May. But yeah. So for this video, we are gonna talk about all of the books that I read in April. I'm also gonna do a flip through of my reading journal so that you can take a look at some of the journal entries that I've created for April. And yeah, let's just hop right into it, right? I mean, it's been long enough. So, let's see what order I'm gonna go in. So, this is April. Books. So the first book I read was The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas, and I loved Cemetery Boys so much that I want to read everything that Aiden Thomas has ever written and anything that he will ever write. And so this particular book definitely gave me Hunger Game vibes if you've ever read it or seen the movie. And according to a lot of other reviews, it also gives Percy Jackson vibes. And so the combination of those two is obviously epic, and that's basically what this book was. So we follow our main character Teo, and Teo is a semidios, and semidioses are pretty common here. There's also humans, but semidioses have like a little bit of power, or they have some sort of power, and the semidios that Teo is a jade, which isn't considered like the most powerful ever, but he still has some significant power. And so he and a few other people are obviously living in this world where the bigger, more powerful semidioses are the golds, and they're the ones who go to like this special school to learn how to use their powers more efficiently and all of that. And so every 10 years or every beginning of each decade, there is this ritual that needs to happen, and in order for the ritual to happen, from my understanding, there is some sort of power that needs to be replenished in this world, and the only way that that could be replenished is when you sacrifice a semidios. So one semidios has to die in order for this power to be replenished. And that power, what it does is that it keeps obsidian gods at bay, or really bad gods in their place, so that they don't, desecrate the rest of the world. And so this sacrifice that is given is based off of these games that are held. It's like this tournament where 10 semidioses are selected, and whoever wins becomes the Sunbearer, and whoever loses is the person that's sacrificed. And the crazy thing is that the person that wins is the person that ends up killing the person that loses. And so it's just like, and you're competing with all of these people. And so it's very apparent, this isn't giving anything away, it's very apparent that Teo was selected as one of the 10, and he didn't expect this to happen because usually it's the gold or like the more powerful semidioses that are selected, because they are the ones that are trained their whole entire life, and it just doesn't make sense why certain people were selected. And so he's in this competition, and his only goal is to really survive, but a lot ends up happening, a lot of fishy stuff is happening, and at the end I was just like very surprised with the ending. We were left on a cliffhanger. There's obviously another book that is hopefully coming out soon because I cannot wait. So overall, as you can tell, enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 5-star, and I cannot wait to continue reading more of Aiden Thomas's work. The next book I read was Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. I actually read the other two, and I'm just so disappointed because, but it's okay. It's all right. It's my fault. It's not the publisher's fault. I actually ended up purchasing this through Book Outlet. Is it Book Outlet? Book Depository? I don't know. One of the ones that's from the UK, and it ended up coming from H Review. The publisher was a different publisher than these two because these are the US editions. And so this US edition is from Minotaur Books, and they're both the same, and they're both fun to look at, but this one's from a different publisher. And the reason is I really wanted to read Finlay Donovan this year, and they came out with a hardcover, and I didn't want to wait until the softcover came out, so I was looking everywhere for the softcover, and I finally found it, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so lucky I found the softcover. And I absolutely love this one because it's floppy and it's great, but obviously it's taller than both of the other two, so it looks weird on my shelf, but you know. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the actual content in this book. I wasn't super happy with this book. I feel like it's just been going a little downhill since the beginning. When we first started, you know, with our first book, which is Finlay Donovan's Killing It, I literally, like, I loved this book. I thought it was so cute. I think I gave this a 4-star or like a really high 3. And then afterwards, Finlay Donovan Knocks Them Dead. I thought it was okay. I gave this a 3, I think. But this, I think, so let's backtrack a little bit. So if you're not familiar with the series, basically Finlay Donovan is a writer, and her husband and her divorced, and so her husband is, you know, was a lot more successful than her, and she is still trying to, like, you know, sell her books and all of that. They have 2 kids, and so she's just trying to balance her whole entire life. And she's meeting with her publisher, and her publisher are talking about her upcoming novel. And it's about this hit woman and all of that. And so someone overhears her and thinks that she's a hit woman and ends up sliding her some cash for her to kill this particular person. And she's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, this is not who I am, but it's a significant amount of money. And as you heard earlier, I mentioned how she is not doing so well financially, and her husband just divorced her, and so it's just a lot on her plate. And so when money is just like right in front of you, it's kind of hard to say no when you really need it. And so she ends up making certain decisions that are not great. And yeah, and that's basically what this whole series is about. She always gets herself in some sort of situation throughout. And the first situation, you know, the first book, we're kind of like introduced to the story. We're kind of like brought into this whole world of like what's going on. All of these characters are being developed. We're kind of understanding what everything is. And then the second one, obviously we're familiar with all of our characters, and there's a new situation based on the old situation. They all feed into each other. And then this last book, it just feels like it's dragging on. I don't want to give anything away, but my biggest qualm with the last book is that it just doesn't, the problem is so significant or seems significant, and then the solution ends up being just something super easy and mediocre and just like attainable, if that makes sense. It's just their struggle throughout the whole entire book, and then the resolution is quick and easy. And I'm not a huge fan of that, right? What really sparked my interest in these kinds of books is I love characters that are morally gray, that don't make good decisions, that I think that they're the most interesting of all. I think a character that is constantly making the worst mistakes and finding resolutions or finding ways out of it, I feel like they're the most interesting. And so obviously Finlay Donovan is one of them. I do have other issues with this series, but overall I absolutely, like, this is like one of those books where it's just like I can finish it in a day and I feel good about it, and it makes me like I'm still interested in knowing what's happening. So overall I am enjoying myself, but it's just like it's like slowly declining, and so I don't know how I feel about that. But anyway, I do recommend the first 2, or actually I recommend the first one, and then you go from there and decide whether or not you want to read the rest. But I feel like not a huge fan of this one. And I gave this a 2.5. Ultimately, I was needing a little bit more. So the next 3 books I read are the Emily Henry books that I created a video completely dedicated to. So if you want like a more in-depth review, or if you need any advice on which order to read them, or any like full-blown questions that this video doesn't answer, you could check out my video. It might be somewhere here. Those were the next 3 books that I read. I started off with Beach Read. We followed January, who's a writer, and love interest Gus, who's also a writer, and they have beautiful banter. They have like their own background going on. Like basically these two, you know, find their way to each other, and it's a small town romance. I feel like Emily Henry always has a way of making all of her books a small town romance, even though people are not from a small town. But I absolutely loved this one. I thought it was really, really good. It had a lot of things that, like I said, people on vacation didn't. Now, what I didn't like about this one was I wish the other characters were a little bit more developed. So for that reason, I gave this a 3.5. Next, we have Book Lovers, which what Beach Read didn't fulfill for me fully, this one did. That's the main characters. The rest of the characters had a little bit more development. Not as much as I was hoping for, but they did have more development. Saw more like other relationships. Like for example, this is obviously a romance book, so we have Nora, who's our main character. She's an agent, and her love interest Charlie, who is a editor, and they're both working together on this book. But Nora also has her baby sister, her younger sister, Libby, and that relationship is also fully blown out as well. So I love that there was more dimension to the characters that Beach Read for me didn't fulfill. And so this one, for that reason, I gave this one a 4.5, I believe, or 4. I think I gave this a 4.5. My favorite of Emily Henry is Happy Place. But I definitely enjoyed this one the most. We follow our main character, who's Harriet, and her love interest Wynn, and they were engaged, but they kind of called it off. And so when their best friends call them and they're like, hey, we're planning this vacation in this cottage where they basically grew up in Maine. They all go back, and they don't tell their friends that they broke up yet because they don't want to like bring down the mood. So they're fake dating, but then at the same time, it's kind of like a second chance romance because they're like, you know, discovering more things about each other. And what I really loved about this one is that this is a whole group of friends. In the video that I created, I did mention that this one reminded me a little bit of how Friends work, like the show. And so for me, I thought that the characters, other than our main characters, were a lot more developed. We learn a lot more, not only about those characters, but their relationships. And it doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't feel like a lot of information. It just feels like the right amount of information for us to see that, hey, the world does not revolve around our main characters, but obviously they're the most important in this book. And I'm curious if Emily Henry is going to maybe do her next book about maybe some of the characters that were in this book because they were so well drawn out. Not sure, but either way, I'm still gonna read whatever Emily Henry comes up with. The thing I'll say about these books is that I felt like the main character had to kind of discover herself a little bit more before she came into, you know, accepting love in her life. And so this book is mostly about finding what makes you happy, and not what makes other people happy, but what makes you happy as a person. And you know, obviously we're talking about a happy place, but does that happy place actually exist, or is the happy place the people that you're with? I don't know. I gave this a 5-star. The next book I read is Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. This is the second book in the Knock 'em Out series. I enjoyed this one a lot more than Things We Never Got Over because I loved the female main character in this, Lena. So Lena is just like this beast of a woman. She is very independent, very much like does not need anyone to help her, like gets her stuff done, and is very like, you know, has her own life. And it felt like in Things We Never Got Over, like Naomi was a little bit more dependent on Knox, you know, and everything like that. But anyway, this one basically starts off where the other one leaves off. You know, certain things go down with Nash, and he's trying to, like, you know, better himself. I'm not going to give anything away if you haven't read the last book, but basically Nash doesn't feel like completely himself, and Lena is there to kind of, well, she's not there for that purpose, but she ends up alleviating a lot of his stress. and makes him feel like himself again. And so obviously these two characters are just like kind of drawn into each other, and we kind of get to a little bit more information about Nash, which he was more of like a side character in the first book. And then, you know, obviously I'm super excited for the next book because that's about Sloane and Lucy, who are other characters in this book and in Things We Never Got Over. So I'm super excited for that one. But overall, I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, the female main character, Lena, was my favorite. I also feel like she's way better than Nash, but I mean, I can't even picture like the perfect person for her because she's not many men that would be deserving of her. And so I guess Nash, he works, but you know, obviously I feel like Lena is just so cool and so hardcore and just, I don't know, so independent that I love the way that the story kind of flowed within this. I thought that it made a lot of sense, and yeah, very much enjoyed this one. I ended up giving this a 4-star. The next book I read was Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake, and I've read her fantasy books. I haven't yet read any romance books. In my April TBR, I mentioned that I thought that this had fantasy elements to it, and it sort of does, but not really. This is not fantasy at all. It's definitely romance filled, and I really did enjoy this one because I felt like both of the main characters were very imperfect, like to the point where they don't even belong together, but somehow they do and somehow they don't. I don't really know how to explain it. What I do know though is that these two main characters were very well drawn out, you know, the world did revolve around them, but that was okay because they had a lot of depth to themselves. And I feel like when you get to know one character initially, you have a certain perception of that character, and then things turn around the more you get to know them, and it felt so real to me. Our main character Regan is, you know, trying to figure out herself, not really connected to love in any way, and just trying to like live her life. Obviously she's in and out of other relationships, but for the most part she's just like very much herself. And then our main character Aldo, kind of similar, but he's just not interested in love at all, like not even interested in anything like that. And so they kind of meet in this like unconventional way of meeting, and they're drawn to each other somehow, and it all clicks. And there's a lot of really good quotes in here, I feel like a lot of life lessons and a lot of like very interesting stuff without it being cliche. So for the most part, I very much enjoyed this. I ended up giving this a 4-star. The next book I read, I was actually lucky enough to be among some of the people that received an e-arc for it, and it is A Circle of Stars. The author is Craig Montgomery. I follow him on Book Talk, on Bookstagram, basically everywhere I could possibly follow him because he's just great. He's amazing. And I just think that a lot of the things that are brought up in this book are so important, but it's also super interesting. In a Circle of Stars, we actually follow 3 characters. I feel like the most main character of the 3 is Casper, because we start off with him, and we start off with him being outed by classmates, and since his parents find out, they actually throw him out. He's kind of just like struggling, homeless, and trying to figure out like what to do. But the crazy thing is he actually was abducted by, I want to say aliens, but they're actually humans. They're just in a different planet, and he's taken to Novellum. Novellum is super interesting, and I need y'all to just hang on to your seats. But Novellum is our like planet that gives power to the people that live there based on their astrological sign. So for example, if you're Capricorn, you can heal quickly. If you're Scorpio, I don't remember what Scorpio is, but every sign, every zodiac sign has a superpower or a power. And it's so interesting to see how all of the powers link together, and so obviously with power comes responsibility. There are certain powers that the government does not believe should be with the rest of the citizens. And so the people that hold this power are removed and kind of just like segregated or separated from everyone else. And it's very sad because there's parents who are separated from their kids, husbands and wives that are separated from each other. And then we also follow Helix, who is from Novellum, and his family is actually part of the government. The character is Talea. I want to say that's how you pronounce it, Talea. And so Talea is a mother whose child was removed from her grasp. And so all three of these perspectives are obviously giving different opinions and different perspectives and different ideas and different who obviously are feeling each and every one of these characters. So it's very interesting how all of these are put together. Overall, I very much enjoyed the story. I don't think that it ended on a cliffhanger, but it did give a lot to, like, you definitely are wondering, like, what's gonna happen next now that certain things have been figured out, but not really. Anyway, I really very much enjoyed it. Book. I ended up giving Circle of Stars 5 stars. And the last book I read in April is one that is actually super popular right now. I actually was very lucky to have received an ARC from Entangled Publishing and Red Tower Books, and that is Fourth Wing. If you are on Book Talk or on Bookstagram, you most likely have seen this, and I have to say it does live up to the hype. I read it before the hype even started because, like I mentioned, I was lucky enough to read it early, and I could not put this book down. I was super into this book, and honestly, I recommend it to anyone who really enjoys fantasy. It's been said that it's kind of like Divergent with dragons, and I have to agree to a certain extent. I know there's a lot of mixed reviews out there, but I definitely enjoyed this one. We follow our main character, Violet, and Violet was actually trained to be a scribe for her whole entire life, and last minute her mom's just like, nope, you're gonna be a dragon rider. And that's all cool and dandy, but in order to be a dragon rider, you have to be among the like 1/3 percentile of the quadrant to survive, because it's literally like everyone dies trying to get to this point. Not only was she not trained, she also is very frail. She has a disability where her bones make her weak, and there's certain things that she can't do. And third, everyone who is competing also hates her because her mom, who's commander of the Dragon Riders, got their parents sentenced to death. So a lot going on here for poor Violet, a lot for her to handle, but what she doesn't have in her physical ability, she has in mental ability. She's very intelligent. She has like this very interesting way of like remembering information, and she uses all her information in a very different way as well. The idea here is that she wants to get a dragon to claim her so that she can basically survive. There's also a romance aspect to this, so that's another thing. I ended up loving it so much. I ended up getting, well, to be frank, I actually pre-ordered this February 2023. I absolutely loved this. I cannot wait for the next book. A lot of people are saying that like the ending was pretty calm. It was a little bit of a cliffhanger, but for me, I thought it was a pretty big cliffhanger. I thought that, you know, like I need to read the next book now. And yeah, so I very much enjoyed this one. I ended up giving this one a 5-star. That concludes all of the books I read in April. I am now going to do a quick flip through of my journal entries. concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you stuck through till the very, very end, usually I ask you to leave an emoji, and this time I'm gonna ask you to leave the answer to a question. Who is your favorite author, or who is one of your favorite authors? I can't pick one author myself, so I can only imagine same goes with you. Respond with mine, and yeah, we can just get to know each other a little bit better. Also, if you want to follow me on my other socials, I have Instagram and I have TikTok, and they're both at Mabel Journals. Usually I record myself creating all of the journal spreads for each book on my Instagram and on my TikTok. And if you're wondering what I'm currently reading, I also update my Goodreads pretty frequently as well, and you should be able to find it with Mabel Journals as well. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, morning, night, all of those things. Thank you so much for spending some time with me, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye!